بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. First of all, I would like to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We would like to welcome everyone and welcome our special guest, Sheikh Hashim, to our masjid, and everyone say Alhamdulillah. This is a blessing for us because if you ask me for an advice on health, we might do a little bit of research and give you some advice. But then in terms of practice and in terms of experience, that's a whole different story. But our Hazrat and our Sheikh, mashallah, it's not only the ilm, the knowledge angle, it's also the experience. And our Sheikh is 76 years old, and mashallah, he's still very active. Some of us, when we get 40, or we turn 30, 40, it's very difficult for us to walk and even shoot basketball. And it gets very embarrassing when we're playing basketball with our sons and etc. But I remember a while ago, Hazrat was over our building. He was able to shoot inside Masjid Bilal's gym basketball. Complete. He was taking 3 shots. MashaAllah. May Allah hafidhahullah. May Allah protect him. Our special guest, I know he needs no introduction. We have already mentioned it, but for those who didn't hear the introduction, Hazrat grew up in a non-Muslim household. And then Hazrat at a young age was actually a musician. And then in 1971, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided him to Islam. And he accepted Islam. And then from there, he got involved in ilm, in learning about Islam, traveled to Saudi and learned with mashayikh over there. And then as well as traveled to Pakistan, and he sat with the akabirin, famous akabirin that we know of, which is, is going to get prolonged introduction if I go into the akabirin. And then he benefited from them, mashallah. Since then, the 1980s, 1990s, you can say around 5 decades of ilm and tajribah experience of the early da'wah in America. You know, the da'wah and tabligh that we see today. But what was it like in the 1980s? Hazrat was one of the amirs, and Hazrat was involved in this effort as well. So we welcome Hazrat. It's a blessing for us that he is here. Today, tomorrow, and Wednesday after Maghrib till Isha, we have these programs. As we saw the flyers, the thing is healthy, meaningful living through Islamic holistic health. Now Hazrat has many specialties, and this is just one specialty. Holistic, healthy, meaningful living is not just ruhani. That's what we learned from our mashayikh, and especially Hazrat. I've been with him, and I'm benefiting tremendously myself. It's not just ruhani, it's not just dhikr, but it's also jismani, as he says. Aqlani, ruhani, jismani, and all of these different angles. So without further ado, I would like today's session is going to be an introduction to this Islamic holistic health. What does that even mean? So today is going to be introduction, and tomorrow and the day after we'll continue this program, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan, everyone.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة وتم التسليم على خير الخلق سيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So first of all, we can park our cars, inshallah, yeah? Put it in your pocket. Yeah, put your cars in the pocket, yeah. There's no driving going on today, inshallah, yeah? When you get home, you can drive your cars, yeah? Okay, I would like everybody also to move up a little bit, yeah? Come close. So that we feel like we're connected. We're trying to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and connect as an ummah. So we have to practice that, you know. Yeah, I know we've become very individualistic, particularly here in the United States of America. United States, it's not very united anymore, you know, it's quite disoriented. So we want to reorient and reconnect. Okay, so a little background on this program. As Fadilat al-Shaykh has mentioned something about my bio, you know, a lot of those riwayats may be gharib, weak, munkar, da'if, mawdu', you know. So as I mentioned the other day, I'm writing a book, perhaps more than anything, as a kind of clarify a lot of these stories floating around about me. You know, sometimes I'm told about, I hear these stories about me that I'm wondering, well, have I lost my memory or what happened? Did I do that? I don't recall that. But anyway, So when I became a Muslim now, before Islam, among the great favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I was offered, we all have in Turdu ni'matullahi la tuhsuha. If you count the favors of Allah, you'll never be able to count them, you see. But one of the great favors of myself and my siblings was my mother, who was quite an extraordinary human being. And she was among the very early proponents of healthy natural living back in the 1950s. And so we were raised in a very sort of natural, healthy way. Chips, cookies, Pepsi Cola, and all this kind of nonsense. Fast food, no, all slow food. Slow, home cooked, raised in our own organic garden. She was a certified organic gardener, permaculturist, and so we grew up like that. And by the time I was a teenager, so I really became quite fanatic in that, and I was also involved in the revolutionary things that were taking place in the 1960s. So among that was rejecting this unnatural and synthetic and very unorganic way of living. Human being is an organic creation, and there's ecosystems throughout the world that work with one another. So we as modern man have learned to destroy all of that. And in so doing, destroying ourselves, the planet, the environment, and everything along with it. So in any case, after accepting Islam and traveling extensively throughout the Muslim world, realizing that I had, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, been guided to the best of religions and the most healthy of lifestyles. However, the Muslims tend to be some of the most unhealthy people. Lifestyle, dietary habits, sleep habits, dealing with stress, etc., etc. A lack of exercise and movement, particularly people in madaris and dini works, our tablighi brothers and sisters, they tend to be inactive physically, which results in catastrophic physical problems. And when you're catastrophically physically disabled, will you be able to live a life of servitude to Allah very easily? It'll be very difficult, if not impossible. So anyway, so this always bothered me since day one. And of course, I used to mention these kind of things off the cuff, if you will. And then some of my colleagues, they mentioned that, why don't you prepare some sort of lessons along these lines, so you could sort of offer this as a kind of a course or workshops or something along those lines. One of my very dear friends and colleagues, Dr. Zishan Ahmed, I don't know if you know him in Pakistan. So he was, a lot of my colleagues were suffering themselves with various what I call civilizational diseases. Heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, dementia. Most of this is actually, it's all lifestyle induced. You don't get, the bacteria of, there's not a bacteria or germs that cause arthritis, for example, or diabetes. It's all, it's all basically, of course, genetics has something to do with it. It may enhance it or not, but generally, because of our poor lifestyle in general, we end up with poor health. It's quite natural. So anyway, so I developed these series along these lines to kind of, for my own circle of friends and colleagues, and then it became quite popular, and now we do it all over the world, in fact, alhamdulillah. So, however, and now health is a big issue, because when you're not healthy, when human beings are not healthy, they come to realize it and they try to remedy that. Now, generally, when we find, the quote-unquote natural and holistic health proponents and gurus out there, purporting to instruct towards the acquisition of good health. It's not grounded in our tradition. Our tradition is a total different perspective, which is what we're going to look at, and why we want to be healthy. Health is a big deal, but for all the wrong reasons. So we need to understand the real reason why we would want to be healthy. So this is usually, these trainings usually are done in the form of a retreat. We actually spend 2 to 3 days in a specific environment, and then it really has its full impact. Maybe we'll, if the interest is aroused in these sessions, perhaps we can have such sorts of retreats here, inshallah. But in any case, so there's some ground rules that we should look at. And first of all, intention. Innamal a'malu binniyat. So why are we sitting here? Why are we engaging in this lesson and in these teachings? Because we want to please Allah. That's why we do everything. So specifically, how do we intend to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? By seeking beneficial knowledge. So that's our intention, which requires full attention. Remove all your distractions. Ensure that your phones are off and away and silent, if not off, totally silent and put away and out of sight. And keep some, if possible, keep some, of course, usually in a workshop environment, and we provide people with writing materials and usually a little manual even, but this is not actually a full-fledged workshop. It's just kind of an introduction, but nevertheless, feel free, and it will be beneficial for you to take notes. Al-ilmu saydun faqayyiduhu bil-hibr. Knowledge is like the game that you're hunting. And how do you tie it up and keep it? By writing it down. Okay, so questions, comments, I would like to share something, all that kind of thing. Welcome, but at its particular time, and as Maulana mentioned, we will be doing that at the end of the session, inshallah ta'ala. So kindly keep your questions, write them down if you need to remember them, and we will try to attend to those at the end of the session. Okay, the entrance, madkhal. So entering into the whole basic concept, I will begin, as the Prophet ﷺ used to begin in many of his sessions with his companions, with a question. Rather than making statements, which people might be prepared to listen to or not. But when you're questioned, it causes people to think. So the question I'm posing here is the question I posed to myself, and I continue to pose to myself, as a matter of fact. But these questions led me to ultimately leave my home and my profession and try and find out the answer. So why am I here? Not why I'm here in the masjid today, but why am I here in this world? What's my purpose of life? So I want everyone just for a minute or two to think about that. What is my purpose? Why am I here in this world? Everything has a purpose, Purpose, we understand that. Yeah, even this. But this, what's the purpose? So I would invite individuals to share what purpose do we think we have? Whatever comes to mind. We do have a purpose, yeah? What would that purpose be? Yeah. To please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wonderful. And how would we do that? By worshiping Him. And what does that mean? Why usually leads to another why and another why until we get to the crux of the matter. Yeah. Very good. Wonderful. Anything else? So I want everybody to think about that. If possible, write it down. In the workshop, that's what we do. We give them 3-4 minutes. Think about it, write it down. And then in the course of the course, we will review our statements and see if we want to edit those statements or revise those statements. So think about that and internalize why am I here in this world? What am I doing here? What am I supposed to be achieving? Okay? Now, there is a concept that I refer to quite often, and I call it a paradigm inversion. We might have heard of a paradigm shift. Anybody heard of a paradigm shift? Who's heard of that? Paradigm shift. Who's heard of that? Not many. Okay, paradigm. Paradigm is a word that actually, it's a relatively new word in terms of being a word, number one, in its usage. But it's something like perceptive. How do we perceive things? The way in which I perceive something, the way that I'm looking at a particular issue. So many times, the way that we perceive things, the way that our cognitive process, if you will, sometimes we come to realize, and many times we don't realize, that the way we're perceiving things might be totally skewed. It might be very distorted. So it might need to be shifted. So therefore we have, what's very common in certain circles, a paradigm shift. We need a paradigm shift. We need to shift the way we see things or think about things. So this is a bit more radical, because I'm actually basically a radical. And that's the way as a youth from the 1960s, were kind of. So we want a more radical approach to our perception. We want to invert. So many times the way that we look at something or the way that we see things or certain situations actually requires a total reversal, a total 180 degrees turning of the way in which we perceive things. And to give a kind of a graphic illustration of how that might look, so A'udhu billahi min I, I seek refuge from me, who am I? But in my short little life on this planet, I've come to the conclusion that there are basically it's a two-party system in the world. I don't mean the Republicans and the Democrats, by the way. So we have the materialists and the Ubudiyyists. So we have people who base their life, number one, and so we will look at that from the standpoint of a paradigm, the material paradigm. Okay? In other words, it's all about material. The whole scientific age is basically what we see, we can analyze, we can quantify, we can taste, smell, feel, touch, conceptualize with our little human brains. So it's real, and if not, it doesn't exist. For you young kids, there's a nice story. In the communist-controlled countries of Central Asia, so the teacher of the small children, they were essentially Muslims. But of course, they had a long process of trying to brainwash them to become atheists. So the teacher has a box with nothing in it. So he opens up the box and says, what do you see inside the box? Nothing. So when you see there's nothing in the box, can there be something? Obviously not, because you don't see anything. So look up in the sky. They say there's a God up there. Do you see any God up there in the sky? No. Then does it exist? No. So one of these little kids, Muslim kid, he said, teacher, do you have intelligence? So what do you mean? Of course. Well, can you show it to us? Can we see it? And of course, no. So then obviously it doesn't exist. So you have these people, which is what most of the world is actually going by in this day and age, what we see, material. So the whole thing is, يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions what most of the people, what they know. They know what they see, what is apparent in the physical world. Having said that, it's an interesting thing. I even before Islam, I never bought into this idea of democracy. Meaning, in the sense that the majority, or let's put it in a different way. The concept of a democratic concept that the majority rules. Why does the majority rule? Because they're right? Is the majority usually right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. If anything, it's the opposite. Allah says, if you follow most of the people on the face of the earth, that take you away from the path of Allah. In other words, they'll misguide you. So if anything, we should see what the minority says. Not the majority, because probably it's only a minority of people that actually understand what's really going on. The majority are clueless. The herd mentality. You know, somebody goes going that way, and we all go that way. Why are we going that way? Well, he's going that way. So where's he going? I don't know, but everybody's going there, so I guess it's right. You know. Majority is right, right? Wrong. So anyway, that's the material paradigm. So that material paradigm, if we want to graphically illustrate that, it might look something like this. What do you see? Huh? Upside down tree. Only a tree? What else? It's not a very good photograph, I admit. But anyway, if you look closely, you'll see there's a building, some other trees. There probably is people in those buildings. And how would they be? Yeah. So the whole thing is pretty much upside down. So that's what the material paradigm looks like. Okay, we have another paradigm, which is called the Ubudiyyah paradigm. Now, this is a word which is well known in the Arabic language. Somehow it eluded Urdu. I don't know why. Abdiyat or ibadah, these are words that they use in the Urdu language, but they don't use Ubudiyyah. I mean, the common people, I don't know why. But anyway, we'll explain this in detail. But it basically comes from the concept that there's a life of slavery to Allah, to the Creator. And so we base our life and our lifestyle and our perception of things based on that model. So how does that look? Well, it looks like this. Now what? What do we have now?
I don't know why, but the other picture actually.
Huh?
I don't know why, but the other picture actually looks a lot clearer now.
Yeah, because we've actually done a paradigm inversion. Huh? So, you get the idea, paradigm inversion? So a lot of things that we perceive or we've been taught or we've been programmed, particularly after the colonialization of Muslim lands, which was a paradigm inversion that they engineered. The British did a very good job. Americans, they're not good at it. They're good at bullying. You know, do what we tell you or we're going to blow you to pieces, you know, and that's what we do. But the English, they're very clever. You know, 007, James Bond, and, you know, they're sharp. So they really did a paradigm inversion on the Muslims, which we're still trying to get out of. They're not the only ones, but they did the best job of it, I think. Okay, having said that, so just keep that in mind that we have this paradigm inversion. There's a lot of times we're going to have to actually apply that in many issues that we come. Okay, so the answer to that question, why am I here? What's my purpose of life? To be honest, the human being, the human intellect cannot perceive that. This might sound strange to you all because you all probably, anybody became a Muslim? Anybody grew up in a non-Muslim house? No. You're very lucky. Yeah, you did. Okay. So you can maybe relate. What kind of background do you come from?
I'm from Honduras.
From Honduras?
Yes, Central America.
Yeah, yes. But I mean, like, your parents, were they Christians or what?
Yeah, they Christian.
They were religious? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, they Christian.
So you probably had some concept also that there's a God and all that. Suppose you grew up in like the communists. Like also, I grew up in although my father comes from an Ashkenazi Jewish family. In fact, my grandfather was the president of the synagogue. But my father somehow, he became an atheist, like a lot of young Jewish people. So they actually get turned off by a lot of things. Anyway, so we grew up thinking that, or we were told that there's no God, there's no hereafter, there's no, paradise and hell. It's all nonsense. So in that case, people who don't have a religious background, they have, if you ask them, they're clueless as to why they're here in this world. It's impossible for the human intellect to figure that out, as simple as it may seem to you, because you've been hearing this since you're children. And for somebody who's never heard this, it is the dilemma of philosophers who are not grounded in some divine system since, immemorially. So if we want to understand why we're here, we're going to have to ask the one who created us. Doesn't that make more sense? Rather than I try and figure it out, my little brain, which has a hard time figuring out a lot of very simple things, something as complex as that is going to be difficult. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in one sentence why He has created us and what is our object of life. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. A rough translation would be, and we have not created, actually it's we, مَا خَلَقْنَا, we meaning, we say in Arabic, al-mutakallim yu'addim nafsa. Like the King of England says, we decreed this. There's no we, plural actually, it's a big person, or a person who thinks he's big. But the only one who's really big is who? Allah. I remember it was very interesting. In Pakistan, you see some interesting thing on the buses and rickshaws. So on so on one bus, I saw this written in English, probably Patan brother, The big Allah. Yani Allahu Akbar. So he has this, the big Allah. So yes, so the only one big is actually Allah. Everything else is, sometimes when they people come and they pick me up, then they want me to sit in the back seat or the front seat, whatever they think the protocol is. So I said, no, I'd like to sit in the back because I'm a VIP. You know what a VIP means? Very insignificant person. Insignificant. I mean, who are we? What are we? If you just get in an airplane and you're a few miles above the air, miles even, you're a few thousand feet above the air. Even New York City looks like a little speck. And then after a while, you keep going up, the Earth is a little speck. And after a while, it's inconceivable. So this little tiny planet, even a little tiny galaxy, in this huge cosmos of existence. So what's this little human being, me and I? What are we? And we think we're so, you're so great and awesome, And actually the man is great and awesome if he fulfills, certain conditions that we'll talk about later, inshallah. So, and actually if he fulfills this ayat. So let's go back to the Arabic so we can understand this a bit better. Because this, particularly if we don't understand the Arabic language, and if we don't understand the Arabic language in a deeper sense, so we're going to miss the point here. Because usually what they translate this is, we have not created the jinn and the men except for worship. So what does that mean? So people think, worship like salat, dhikr, hajj. So we have to spend all our time in worship. So what about business? No, that's not worship. That's dunya. What about running the country, government? That's dunya. That's not ibadah. And all these other things. So all that other stuff is fuzul, and that's out of the scope altogether. And so we missed the point. So in Arabic, number one, worship is a noun. This is not a noun. Ya'budun. Li ya'budun. This lam. We call this lam al-ta'lil. For what purpose? This is going to explain. This is going to tell you for this purpose. The purpose of ya'budun. It's a fi'l mudari. A fi'l mudari means continuous sense, now and continuously. So we're continuously going to be engaged in something. So what's that something we're going to be continuously engaged in? Ubudiyyah. What are we going to be engaged in? Ubudiyyah. Ibadah comes from this. So Ubudiyyah is this concept, ya'budun comes from this ya'budun, that we are continuously acting like slaves. basically. From abd, we've all heard of abd. Heard of abd? Abdullah, inni Abdullah. What does that mean? I'm the slave of Allah. We're all the slaves of Allah. So we have obedient slaves and we have runaway slaves, like us. We pretty much, do what we want. No, obedient slave, he doesn't do anything without the permission and the guidance of his master. Because after all, the slave doesn't own himself. He doesn't own what's in his pocket. It belongs to his master. So he's always seeking the permission of his master. So that means, ya'budun means that basically continuously focused on our master and trying to ascertain what he wants from us and then doing that. That's ya'budun. From the time we wake up until the time we sleep. Right? So this ubudiyyah is basically Allah's obedience and servitude out of His reverence and love. Why do we obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Why do we serve Him? Why do we obey Him? Because we love Him. Why? Because He gives us everything. He gave us existence. How many people here think that you deserve to exist? I deserve to exist. You think so? What right do you have? What right do you have to deserve to exist?
I'm really bad with words. I had no idea what you meant. I thought. Yeah, I'm really bad with words. Just know that.
Yeah, so we don't have the right to exist. We have the privilege of existing. Allah gave us, nobody put in a petition, oh Allah, I think I deserve to exist, so you should create me. Nobody did that. Allah, out of His mercy and out of His benevolence, He created us. Not only that, He gave us everything. Think about this. When we sit down at our dastarkhan, at our maida or our dinner table, just think about all these various things that we have to enjoy. We have fruits, different flavors and colors and tastes and benefits, vegetables and different types of meats and fish and so many things. And Allah subhanahu has taught us very novel ways of preparing those things also. Now, Allah subhanahu could have created us like the cows and the sheep and the goats and other things, like, before we go to the office, we go out in the lawn and graze on the grass in the lawn for 15, 20 minutes and drink some water and go to the office. Right? Cows do that their whole life. And they don't seem to have any issue with it either. They're not complaining that, hey, grass every day, They live their whole life like that. They're quite content. And we get the same dish 2 days in a row. Oh my God. The poor housewife, she's going to be, she's going to be really in trouble. So we don't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or we shouldn't, or that should not be the concept, even though generally it is, until we realize our folly. We should be worshiping Allah because we want to. Right? Because we reflect on His benevolence and His favor, and so we show gratitude. Okay, so there are three terms that all of us are very familiar with, at least in terms of hearing them and speaking them, but do we really understand what they mean? So we need to ensure that we're getting this right. Number one, Islam. What does Islam actually mean?
Submission.
Who said? Submission. Anybody else? Huh? Would you all agree with that? That's exactly right. Submission. A lot of times people say it means peace. Actually, Islam is not peace. That's salam or salama. You won't have peace without Islam, that's for sure. But actually, technically, Islam, it has a very specific meaning. Aslama yuslimu Islam, inqiyad. You surrender. I'll give you an example. Suppose, there's somebody, these young guys, they've been watching a lot of these, Rambo movies or something, and they think they can pull off some kind of, heist. So they go down to Wall Street and rob a bank, and they're running, they're fleeing down Wall Street. And then, lo and behold, you've got police cars coming from all directions and police helicopter, and so they find themselves with machine guns aiming at their head from every direction. What do? What do you do? When you're faced with that, they say, hands up, surrender. What do? You do it. You surrender. If you got any gray matter up there, you're going to surrender. Not because you love the police, but because you have to. So surrendering means so we realize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's position, His favor, His gratitude. So as I mentioned, and that's kind of a very gross example, but the idea is that we submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's what Islam basically means. So it's not a philosophy. It's a action. It's a mind and heart set, if you will. Right? Islam. Our deen is Islam, submission. It's an action. It's a mindset, it's a heart set, and it's a series of actions. Okay, so then what is a Muslim? What is a Muslim? We all call ourselves Muslims, right? So you meet somebody on the street, are you a Muslim? What is a Muslim? Good question. Let me go ask Muldi Sahib, Well, if you're a Muslim, you're supposed to know what you are, right? Otherwise, how can you be one? So what is a Muslim? Yeah? Exactly, because it's an active participle. In Arabic, we say ism fa'il. So it's the active participle of Islam. So it's the one who's actively submitting. Now we have a big issue. So what do you mean? So suppose we're submitting, suppose we're not totally submitting, maybe we're doing some things, we're not doing some. We have people, for example, they call themselves Muslims, they say the kalima, they believe, there's only one Allah, they believe Muhammad was his messenger, they don't pray, they don't fast, they don't worry about halal, haram. So are they a Muslim or not? Are they Muslim? Huh? Name only. Well, he's got a name, but he also, if you ask him, do you believe in Allah? Yeah. Do you believe Muhammad is the prophet, the last prophet and all that? Yeah, I believe that. Do you pray? No. Do you fast? No. Do you worry about halal, haram? No. Do you think you're right about that or wrong? No, I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong about that. But, make dua for me, kind of a thing. Right? So can this person be called a Muslim? Okay. So I'll give you the example of two people. One, we have Abdullah. Abdullah, mashallah, he's fit, he's strong, he's intelligent. Mashallah, he's got a vibrant family. He's the CEO of his company. He's engaged in community activities. He's just a great guy. He's doing all kinds of great stuff. He's alive, right? No question about it. We've got poor Khalid. Poor Khalid, he's, he wasn't following my guidance in the healthy, meaningful lifestyle, and he's ended up with cancer and diabetes and arthritis and heart disease and I don't know what all. So he's in the ICU unit, and he's just basically almost like a vegetable, other than his heart is pumping and his brain is functioning, but he's unable to do anything. Can't look after his family. He can't, engage with the society. He can't do anything. He can't even eat and drink. It's all being fed intravenously. Is he alive or not? He's also alive, but the quality of life is good. Suppose we say, look, this guy, he's useless. He can't even help himself, much less his family, community, and we're spending, hard-earned tax dollars, so keeping this guy alive. I mean, let's be practical. Just bury the guy and let's get done with it. Can we do that? Suppose we do. What does that make us? Murderers. Because the guy was alive. Even though his life was, for all practical purposes, was a useless life, but nevertheless he was alive. So he was alive, but the quality of life was at the very bare minimum, whereas Abdullah, mashallah. So we have people who are Muslims at the very lowest level, the minimum level, and that is just the acknowledgement of the kalima, and maybe nothing else. And at least acknowledging that, whatever I'm supposed to do, but I don't do it. And then you have the highest, which is Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the benchmark. and everything in between. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of stratas between. So a Muslim, at least, he's submitting with his heart, but that's not the complete Muslim, the ideal Muslim, who is not only saying the kalima, believing in the kalima, but he's acting on it. And to what extent he's acting on it? Well, he acts on it through practicing the deen. So what is deen? That's another thing. We have the deen. What deen? Deen al-Islam. So what do you mean by deen?
System of establishing a
Way of life. Well, there's all kinds of ways of life. So deen is any way of life or a specific one? Hmm?
the 5 pillars of Islam.
5 pillars? What about all the rest of it? We'll talk about that later. It's good that you brought that up. Yeah. All right. Okay, deen is basically the total system of submission. The total system. And we say total system when we're talking about the scope. Scope is all activities of life and all roles of life. Everything we do. From the time that we wake up until the time that we go to sleep, we're going to be engaged in some action, right? Human being, when he's conscious, he is continuously engaged in intentional action, which is called amal. Unless he's a paraplegic or something, and he's out of his control. But usually, whatever a human being does, there's some intention behind that. And so those actions which have some intention could be either good action or bad action, but he's always doing something. So that something that he's doing any given moment is also governed by deen. There's guidance for that. And all roles in life, it's not just our role, our religious roles. What about as a father? What about as the community leader? What about the CEO in the company? What about the worker? And what about the whatever? Whatever role you have in life, deen is going to give you the framework how to live that. Is this understood, folks? So this is where a lot of us, we understand deen to be certain activities of our life, like salat, the ibadat generally with people. But as for the way that we work, the way we raise our family, the way I earn, the way I spend, the way I build my house, the way I dress, the way I eat, the way I whatever, I'm free. We're in the United States of America, folks. This is the land of the free, home of the brave and all that stuff, No, we're the slaves of Allah in each and everything. That's the Muslim. So we need to look at it. So all activities and all roles in life, the deen covers all of that. And the very delicate issue is, with all of these roles that we have in life and all these activities that we engage in or think we should be engaging in, there needs to be a balance. This is a big issue. And that's another very long discussion. What time is Salat, by the way? 9:45. Okay. So another 15 minutes and then we'll open the floor for discussion, questions. So deen is basically the operational application of Ubudiyyah. Ubudiyyah, remember Ubudiyyah? Huh? The concept that we are the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to have the mindset and heart set of submission and act like slaves rather than free men, that we think we are. So here we have an exercise. Maybe this is how we'll spend the next 15 minutes. Okay, here's the exercise. We have 2 ayats of the Quran. Number 1, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ألم تر كيف ضرب الله مثلا كلمة طيبة. Did you not see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set forth a parable? كلمة طيبة. A goodly saying is a goodly tree. كلمة طيبة كشجرة طيبة. This is a good saying, which is the kalima, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, as a goodly tree. It was basically an example, a sort of picture, we say istiara in Arabic. So that when we picture something that we can conceptualize, and intangible concepts become easier to kind of understand. So when this kalima is in the Muslim, the mu'min, and it's actually acting, and he's actually observing Ubudiyyah as we described. He's like this tree. How is he like this tree? Asruha thabit wa farruhu fi sama. The roots are very deep into the ground, and so that tree's not going anywhere. Wind comes, storm comes, snow comes, rain comes, hail comes, Donald Trump comes, whatever happens, you will have a tree which is not going anywhere. It's thabit. Wa farruha fi sama. Farruha fi sama. Its branches are high in the sky. And as a result of that, and so therefore the fruits of this tree is always coming. There's not a season. And these fruits have all different types and different tastes and different benefits. Continuous giving of these fruits. And in this way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sets forth parables so that we think, we reflect, ponder over these things. Second ayat that was connected to this example is أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لقد من الله على المؤمنين إذ بعث فيهم رسولا من أنفسهم. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did confer a great favor upon the believers when He sent a messenger from among them, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What does He do? يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمْ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. Three major types of effort that He, or if you want to call them initiatives, that He applies on His companions for their transformation. What are they? Number one, يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ. He recites to them the ayats of the Quran. This is the recitation of da'wah. He invites them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the medium of Quran. وَذَكِّرْ بِالْقُرْآنِ مَنْ يَخَافُ الْوَعِيدِ. Secondly, purifying them. Human beings by default, by nature, they have these animalistic qualities and they're there for a purpose, for survival, basically. But they can get out of control and they need to be purified. They need to be refined. Some of them need to be removed altogether, replaced with beautiful qualities, angelic qualities, beautiful qualities. So this process of purification, tazkiyah, tarbiyah, secondly. Thirdly, وَيُعَلِّمُ الْكِتَابُ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, teaching them the book and the wisdom. The way of the Prophet ﷺ and all types of wisdom that are going to be beneficial for mankind. So this is how the Prophet ﷺ worked on his people to transform them, the revolution that he brought. This was the modus operandi. Although before that they were manifest error. Okay, now, the exercise is, what is the big picture of this tree? What's the big picture? What's the big theme here? Okay? So somebody, I want you to write this down, by the way. Everybody write this down. You can put this in your phone because we're going to make groups and we're going to do a little exercise. You can discuss this among yourselves. So these are the questions. What's the big picture here? Identify the parts of the tree. Yeah, just take a picture. Yeah, I give you permission to take out your phone, take a picture, and so you can have this exercise. Okay? And then the most important is number 3. How did this tree bear fruit? What was the process? Use the information provided in the image. In other words, a real tree, there's a lot of different things happening, but we're just going to work with what we have here. You know, whatever words you see here, whatever you see there in the diagram, we want to explain how this tree produced fruit within the framework of this graphic right here. Is that clear, everybody?
It's not showing the,
Huh?
It's not showing the tree. The tree is not there on the.
The tree's not there? Where is it? Oh, there it is. Oh, okay. So now, yeah. So you've got the ayat on top and you got the ayat on the bottom because these are connected to the graph. Can everybody see that? Okay, what we want to do is just make some groups very quickly. We have a short time. We've got about 10 minutes. Okay? So just make some groups like about 5, 6, 7, 8 quickly. and have a discussion. Everybody involve themselves in this, mudhakara, if you will, and then we'll call on one or two of the groups to present their findings. Okay? Yeah. So let's have all you young guys spread out with the elders. We want a group of youngsters and elders. Okay? Quickly, time is short. Yeah. Bismillah. You can just right where you are, make a halaqah. 5, 6, 10 people, however many. They're in the back, in the middle. Our brothers over here. Yeah. Fadl. Fadl Ismail. MashaAllah, here this gentleman, he's experienced in this. He's attended our session so many times. Fadl. Yalla. Okay, you've got 8 minutes. Bismillah.
Just want to share the slide with the questions. Do you want to share the slide with the questions as well so that people can take a look? The questions that you had.
For the exercise?
Yeah. People are asking if you have parts.
Remember manners, akhlaq, ibadah, muamalat, business relations, and then muashara, social etiquette. And then the middle was like the beliefs and Ubudiyyah, was it? Yusuf? You're here?
Okay, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. So hopefully we would have come to some basic conclusions. So who would like to present? We have time for one presentation. You. Bismillah. So give him a mic. Should I give him this one? Yeah, just take this one. Tell him.
So the first question represented here was, what is the big picture represented here? And that was the tree. The tree shows all the components of Islam, meaning the submission of Allah in every single different way. The second question is to identify the parts of the tree. All the parts of the tree are what make Islam submission to Allah.
Okay, what are the parts? Just identify. What are the parts?
The parts are adab,
No.
muasharat.
Tree has a part. Like what? Trunk.
The trunk.
Does it start with the trunk? Starts with the roots. Then you have what?
Then you
Trunk.
have the trunk.
Then you have
Then you have the branches.
branches. Then you have fruits. That's what we have in the ground. Because every one of these components has a significance. Yeah, that's why. Okay, then. So how did we get fruit?
Because the commandments of Allah led to a way of life, and that way of life led to more good actions, such as the etiquettes of interaction and social etiquettes, adab, akhlaq.
Can you explain the process of the tree? Just as the tree bore fruit, what was the process? Where did it start? And how did it ultimately culminate in fruit?
So the seed was the commandment of Allah, the Quran, what was in the Quran, and there was also the hadith, which led to a way of life, and that way of life also has some branches, such as etiquettes of speaking. So that was the trunk, and then the branch that leads to the etiquettes of speaking, ibadah.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a little clue. We have that verse. لقد من الله على المؤمنين بعث فيهم من رسول من أنفسهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. دعوة تعليم تربية. Did that have any impact? Dawat, Ta'aleem, Tarbiyah. Okay, continue whatever you had in mind. Yeah.
So that led to what Islam is shown on the tree.
Mm-hmm. And then ultimately you got fruit. Okay, so there's a lot in this diagram because it's the example of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given in the Quran. So there is the knowledge of Allah in this parable, which has no end. Right? So there's a lot to be said, and since we don't have a lot of time, I will, as a kind of a teaser also, we will explain this in detail tomorrow to keep you in suspense, to ensure that you come back tomorrow, inshallah. Okay, in the meantime, we have just a few minutes, so if there's any questions or clarification or something for the next couple of minutes before we have the adhan and salat. No questions, mashallah. So everything was totally understood, inshallah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you talked about the paradigm shift, right?
Yeah.
But what happens is, sitting here in this majlis, yes, you can think about it, but when you go into the real world and you have to do a job, the materialistic world comes back into play then.
Exactly. Great question. Not a question. It's kind of a statement. And okay, so how do we navigate? Right. That's okay. So while we're in this environment and induced by the various elements of the environment, obviously we find it easier to conceptualize and perhaps even practice. That's the whole concept of tablighi jamaat. That's what they do. They take you, they keep you in the masjid for 3 days, 4 days, whatever. And so in that environment, ostensibly, if you engage in what you're supposed to be engaged in, then and it actually does, it transforms you. Then you go back out into the real world, as they say. Not that this is the real world. That's pretty much the fantasy land out there, you know. But nevertheless, the idea is that it's just like a battery. I mean, there's a lot to be said on that, but since the time is short, we say the khulasatul khulasa. The summary of the summary is just like a battery drains. What do you do when the battery drains? There you go. And for that, very interestingly, you'll see the Prophet ﷺ even was given instructions, something along these lines. Ya ayyuhal muzammil, qum al-layla, charge your battery in the night. O Prophet of Allah, stand up in the night in tahajjud and, you know, with your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's the resetting, recharging, if you will. Inna laka fin nahari sabhan tawila. As for the day, you've got this long exercise of inviting the creation to Allah. It's not an easy thing. It's a very tough job. Toughest of jobs. So that's very battery draining, isn't it? So the continuous process. So we'll talk about this more tomorrow when we talk about ruhani health and how to develop iman and how to protect iman and what are the elements that develop iman and what are the elements that destroy iman. So we'll talk about that in more detail tomorrow. But a very important dilemma which everybody faces being a human being. Great. Anything else? So we're getting close to the time, so someone needs to make wudu, etc. So inshallah, I will give a short, tomorrow's session, we'll begin with a kind of synopsis of this exercise and a little bit of what all we might be able to ascertain from this parable. And then we'll talk about Rouhani health, inshallah, in a little bit of detail. Otherwise, this Rouhani health module is a 3-day continuous module. But we'll give some highlights so that we get a little bit thirst for it, and then inshallah we'll have this. Okay, Jazakumullah khair for attending, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all ilm al-nafi'ah, al-ma'alimna ma yanfa'na wa anfa'na bima 'allamta. Ameen thumma ameen wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.